The iPad lineup is starting to look more and more consistent and symmetrical across the entire lineup, but you know what that means, especially if there's going to be an inevitable iPad Air refresh next year, and it sounds like it might be getting an OLED display, if the leaks end up being correct, which, let's be honest, they always are. How exactly is Apple going to be able to keep the iPad Pro separated and have features going for it? In my opinion, might have to come down to cameras. Let's begin. So yeah, Apple has already started showing that with features like Center Stage, introduced with the iPad Pro, but they very quickly brought it to the cheapest iPads, which basically means it's inevitable that the iPad Air, whatever the next refresh is, will probably have 5G support, probably have Flash, and of course probably have Center Stage. But if it starts sporting a higher dynamic range display, which again is rumored, what are the Pro features going to be exactly aside from the gargantuan 12.9-inch option? Like, should Apple go back to the time where the iPad Pro only came in one size, and if you don't want an iPad that big, maybe you should just stick with an iPad Air? Well, so far at least, it seems they're comfortable making 120 Hz a Pro feature, as well as Face ID, and of course giving it Max series of chips, the M1 chip, but knowing how limited iPadOS is, I don't think that having the A15 chip or even A14 chip is going to make that big a difference in your day-to-day iPad usage, and 120 Hz, a lot of people notice it, but a lot of people certainly don't, so it makes sense to keep that as a Pro feature. Still, I keep finding myself asking, what does Apple do with the next iPad Pro upgrade, which is probably going to happen at some time next year? We've heard about Apple toying around with wireless charging on the iPad Pro, but I could not really see any practical way of that happening. Trying to get MagSafe working, especially when we have these big metal magnetic cases that slap on the back of our iPads in titanium, would probably just drive up the price even further. Wouldn't really result in much of a difference. It's still pretty light anyway. So one feature that I'm gonna go ahead and throw out there is Apple bringing over the exact same cameras that we've been so impressed with on the 13 Pro and 13 Pro Max, even though I'm well aware that a lot of you guys don't see the point in rear-facing cameras being very good on iPads because we mostly use them, just at their display. No one wants to be holding around a giant iPad like that for taking pictures and videos, but I'm gonna disagree and say that if the iPad camera actually got some substantial updates, aside from just like, ooh, LiDAR, ooh, an ultra-wide, then maybe having a viewfinder that's 12.9 inches and having the power of the M1 chip, hopefully being able to process ProRes videos soon, as it's now been confirmed that Apple is planning on bringing ProRes into iPhones later this fall. That means hopefully ProRes will be compatible for video editing on the iPad as well. If that ends up being the case, I actually think the iPad Pro could be an excellent video production tool if ProRes ends up being as good as Apple is saying, because this version of video recording is far less compressed than all of the 4K at 60 or even all of the 8K video we've seen recorded on smartphones for years now, and we know that the A15 chip with its GPU is capable of recording 4K at 30 ProRes at least if you get 256 gig or higher, whereas the Apple M1 chip, of course, is even faster than the A15, plus the iPad Pro has storage options that go up to 2 terabytes. So if there's someone out there that is actually planning on recording more of their videos directly off of their iPhone instead of the annoying process of recording a 4K at 30 video at ProRes, which is going to take up a lot of space, a lot of people are estimating it might end up being like 5 gigs a minute, trying to airdrop those enormous files or even send those enormous files over the Lightning port, which doesn't really have super fast data transfer speeds, that's going to be rather frustrating. So if you actually had an iPad that you could dock with a Magic Keyboard case and use advanced video applications like LumaFusion, hopefully getting ProRes support soon, I could see someone being able to record a very high resolution, very cinematic mode looking video with having lots of options. I'm not talking about cheaping out on the ultra-wide. Give the iPad the freaking same ultra-wide lens, the same telephoto lens that the 13 Pros are getting, because hey, this iPad, the one I'm talking about here, is probably going to be north of $1,000, and we've already got the high dynamic range on the mini LED iPad. I consider it inevitable that of course the next generation will bring mini LED to the 11-inch option. There's no surprise there. Maybe they even transition to OLED if they can get 120 Hz working and they don't have as big of burn-in issues and they can get peak brightness to be how they like it, where it is with mini LED. Bringing ProRes video recording to the iPad, in my opinion, actually might make more sense, because I can't wait to try out ProRes on my iPhone, but I'm starting to ask myself, myself, what's going to be the best way to transfer that footage? It's going to take forever over AirDrop or through the lightning cable, but if I was able to record this awesome cinematic video or this high bitrate video on a device that's already capable of editing it with a larger display, you know, trying to edit ProRes video on the iPhone, even a 6.7-inch screen is going to be very awkward, and trying to pair a keyboard and mouse to your phone, I know it technically does it, but don't do that. iPad Pro, as limited as iPadOS can be, is in a far better position to become a very, very powerful cinematic tool, and having a viewfinder that large to analyze all of your pictures, having Pro RAW capabilities on the iPad as well, and let's say even if you wanted to edit ProRes video on an actual MacBook or a Mac Mini or an iMac or whatever Mac you want to end up using, the M1 iPads, or maybe next year they'll have the M2 chip or whatever, they're going to have Thunderbolt 3 capability through that USB-C port. So if the 11-inch iPad is really compact, then you can throw it in a bag, but also whip it out real quick, suddenly record high-resolution video. Who knows, maybe the M2 chip with its advanced GPU cores and its faster single-core and multi-core performance, maybe you'll get 4K at 60 ProRes out of that iPad. You can record advanced stuff with that, edit it on the go, or transfer it out of your Thunderbolt connector into a Mac and actually edit that video with Final Cut or with Premiere or with whichever software you want to use that's not available on the iPad, because it's an iPad, therefore it can't do advanced things. I'm still salty, I know, about iPadOS as a whole, but I'm thinking that the camera upgrades we're seeing with the 13 Pro line this year would actually start to make a ton of sense on a device that you can pair a keyboard and trackpad to, or a keyboard and mouse, and edit in a fairly advanced way. I could see that logically making a ton of sense for people that are spending, you know, $1,500 or $2,000 on their iPad Pros, which Apple has the option for those who want it. But given we've got the high dynamic range on the Pros, we've got Face ID, we've got 120 Hertz, we've got Thunderbolt and USB-C, what's left for the iPad Pros to get? Camera upgrades. Give it some awesome center stage performance, give it that cinematic mode, give it that ProRes video recording, and heck, because it's larger and it's got a more powerful silicon inside it, this should be recording better videos than the iPhone. Yeah, I'll say it. I don't care if the price goes up. There's a direction the iPad Pro needs to go in, and I have to assume that the Pros can do a little bit more than just, okay, there's wireless charging now, which you're not going to be able to use because you're always putting this thing in a bulky keyboard case, and ooh, now the chassis is made of titanium. Okay. Great, yeah, because the aluminum is so heavy, right? Am I crazy? Does it make sense to bring all of the Pro camera features like the sensor shift image stabilization and Pro RAW and the telephoto to an iPad? It sounds crazy, but I think it makes a ton of sense. Let me know what you guys think. This is your Alp Sheep here. I'll see you guys in the next one.